Welcome to this dotCMS webinar on push publishing. My name is Dean Gonzalez, lead trainer with dotCMS. This webinar will consist of three basic parts. We will first review push publishing concepts, best practices, and things to consider before setting up your push publishing environment. Then I'll demonstrate push publishing configurations, methodologies, and troubleshooting. Just to give a little more detail on this webinar's scope, we will first look at things you need to know before setting up a push publishing environment, talk about the best ways to plan your push publishing implementation, look at recommended ways to set up a push publishing environment, how to test push publishing, the different ways to push publish dotCMS objects. Then we will do a final review of the most important best practices to remember before we do a complete push publishing demonstration between two servers. And finally, we will finish off with our Q&A session. Before setting up push publishing, it is important to read the dotCMS documentation section on push publishing. This video will also be posted on the dotCMS videos page for future reference. We also have complete training packages which include push publishing training for content editors and webmasters alike. Not all objects push publish in the same way, and some objects do not push publish at all. The most important document to read is the What to Know Before Push Publishing documentation, which explains some of the more important concepts to be aware of when pushing dotCMS objects. That push publishing documentation explains that neither roles, permissions, nor vanity URLs can be push published. Category taxonomies applied to dotCMS content types can be pushed, but pushing categories is a complete synchronization of the sending server's category lists to the receiving server. It is not possible to push a single category, so these are important things to be aware of before push publishing. In addition to reading the documentation, it is important to plan your push publishing architecture. Please note that copying a server and configuring push publishing between two server clones is not usually a successful strategy. Some things about each server need to be the same, and some things should be completely different when setting up your sending and receiving servers. On each server, the dotCMS version, Java version, and database must match. Each server must have its own dotCMS enterprise license. It's important to define which servers will be utilized for the development, authoring, and production environments. Define one authoring environment for each user role, developers, content editors, etc. Plan the push publishing workflow for each role. Plan your push publishing architecture and testing phase. Plan for training each user group. During your planning phase, you should think about how many push publishing environments you'd like to set up and how many servers will be part of each environment. This is a simple two-environment plan where developers and content authors both work on the sending receiver, preview content, and then when ready, push the dotCMS objects over to the production server. In this example setup, neither developers nor content editors should be allowed to author content on the production server. All publishing and unpublishing of objects should be done from the authoring or sending server. If the resources are available for 3 or more push publishing environments, then development can happen on one environment without interrupting the content editing that is happening on the middle authoring environment. In this example, content editors should be permissioned only to the authoring server. Developers should be permissioned only to the development environment, but both developers and content editors should be able to push to the production environment after previewing the data that they are pushing on their own respective sending environments. Another advantage of this 3-environment setup is that developers can stage test new large feature pushes to the authoring environment before pushing those changes to production. Once the servers are ready, and there is a plan for each push publishing environment, the next step is to configure a sending and receiving environment using the configuration settings under the System tab on the dotCMS backend UI. Then each role needs to be given access to use each environment to push publish, and workflow schemes and push publishing sub-actions should be set up to make the push publishing process easy for content editors. We will demonstrate each of these setup options during the demonstration in just a few minutes. After configuring push publishing between environments, the push publishing integrity checker should be run to check for duplicate dotCMS objects between servers. Then some basic push testing of dotCMS objects should be done as the admin user. And finally, admins should use the Login As feature to log in as a member of each user role to push test dotCMS objects to make sure that the push publishing workflow was configured properly. It is very important to make sure that users and role permissions are not duplicated on both the sending and receiving servers. If a user and role are only set up with push rights on the sending environment, then a system user will be used to push the content and there will be no verification of permissions by the receiving server. However, if the user is created on both the sender and the receiver, then role permissions for that user will always be checked and will always need to be maintained identically on both the sender and the receiver, which in most cases is usually an unnecessary duplication of process. Make sure each part of the web team understands their role and their own push publishing options. Train developers and content publishers how to push from their authoring environments and have each group test their own push publishing workflow. Show content publishers how to troubleshoot unexpected behavior, and remember that the dotCMS support team and training department are always available as a training resource when you need us. In the demonstration, we're also going to show that there are several different ways to push publish dotCMS objects. Developers and content editors can push publish content via a workflow subaction, as a right-click option on the object itself, and by grouping objects into a dotCMS push publishing bundle. Before we begin the demonstration, let's review some of the most important best practices to keep in mind when both planning and implementing your push publishing strategy. Make sure to first plan your push publishing architecture. Make sure each server has the same software stack but a different dotCMS license. Each role should create content on only sending environments, not on receiving environments. Use the integrity checker to troubleshoot unexpected behavior if it occurs. Leverage dotCMS workflows to make push publishing simple for content editors. And finally, make sure to train administrators, developers, and content editors before they are tasked to set up push publishing or push publish dotCMS objects. So now let's move to a live demonstration of a push publishing configuration between two servers. After we configure push publishing, we will test the environments and push publish content using a few different methodologies and show how to troubleshoot potential issues. Okay, so I have here a local installation of the dotCMS 3.3.1 version that is going to be my sending or authoring server, and I'm making sure that my Amazon server instance is also running the same dotCMS version. I have also made sure that I'm running the same Java version and the same database on both servers. Notice that on the site browser, when I right-click any object, I do get the Add to Bundle Push Publishing option, but I do not get the Push Publish option. This will happen after I set up the Push Publishing configuration. Now let's configure the Push Publishing environment on the authoring server, then on the receiver. Under System, click on Configuration, and then on the Publishing Environments tab to start configuring environments. Since this is my authoring or sending server, I'm going to click the Add Environment button to the right of the Send To option. Now this is the environment that I'm sending to. It may contain only one server, a cluster of servers, or several individual servers. After we configure the environment, we will add the server to the environment. So we've given the environment a name, purposefully chosen a role permission user on this server that does not exist on the other server. This way the user's permissions will not be checked on the receiving server and a system user will be used in making the push. Otherwise, we have to constantly maintain permissions for this user on both servers because, as I said earlier, permissions do not push. As a best practice, only set up users and permissions on sending servers. Do not duplicate them on receiving servers. Then finally, if I am sending to a clustered environment of servers, I would push to one server in the cluster only because clustered servers naturally communicate and update each other. Use the Push to All Servers option only when you are pushing to more than one server that are not sharing assets in a cluster. Okay, let's save that environment and now we can add servers to the environment. So I'll give my production server a name, paste in the IP address or the domain name, set the proper port, and choose the proper protocol, HTTP or HTTPS. Now the sending and receiving servers need to have the same password or encryption file to securely identify each other. Choose either a path to a text file that has the key inside it or simply type in your own authorization token. I'm going to use 12345 for this example. Now we want to click on the receiving server and set up the push publishing connection to the sending server in the same way, but this time we will use the Add Server button to the right of the Receive From option. So I'll give the server a name, paste my local IP address, then enter the same authorization token and save the configuration. Now we need to test the push publishing environments by clicking the Check Integrity button on the sending environment. This will check both servers for objects that have the same name but different identifiers. These are evil twins that get created when users are allowed to create content on both the sending and the receiving servers. There aren't any conflicts now, but we will create a conflict later and show how to troubleshoot conflicts that arise. It's a good idea to perform a few simple tests as well to make sure our push publishing configuration is working properly. So let's go to the site browser, create a new folder, upload a file to the folder, and push the file to the receiving server. Notice that every object on the site browser menu now has the Push Publish right-click option. After clicking on Push Publish, we have a few options to consider. We can either push, take back a push by choosing the remove option if we had already pushed this file and then realized that we had made a mistake and wanted to remove it as if we had never pushed it in the first place. Or we can choose push and remove, which allows you to push the file at a certain date and time and also remove everything that was pushed at a certain expired date and time in the future. Now dotCMS tries to be intelligent about the way we push. Let's say we were pushing a folder with hundreds of files instead of just this one. If the system always sent every file, whether it had been changed since the last push or not, then pushing objects would be less efficient. So we keep track of files that have already been pushed and whether or not they have been updated or changed in any way since the last push. If they have not been changed, they are not included in the push. The Force Push option can be checked to force all objects to push even if they have not been changed. If someone had inadvertently deleted objects on the receiving server after our last push, then we would need to force the push whether changes have been made or not so that the receiving server could receive those deleted files again. If you have multiple environments set up, you will need to choose one. If there is only one receiving environment, it is chosen for you by default. After clicking the Push button, we can go to the Push Publishing queue under the Site Browser tab. We can see that the push of the file is pending. Clicking on the Status History tab allows us to track the status of the Push Publishing bundle. After clicking Refresh, we can see the Success Status message. Clicking on the name of the object gives a small report of the details of the push that can help in troubleshooting if the push is unsuccessful. Now when we click on the Site Browser tab on the receiving server, we can see that not only was the file pushed, but the folder was also pushed as a dependency. Using this same right-click methodology on any object will push content, templates, containers, content types, pages, menu links, and more. You can even push publish entire websites in this way. However, there is a way to make push publishing even easier for content editors by setting up push publishing via workflow scheme subactions. For example, there is a workflow scheme which is set up on the dotCMS starter site to control the push publishing workflow of the documentation file type. Let's alter the workflow and add a push publishing subaction to the legal approval step of the workflow scheme. All we have to do is click on the Add a Workflow Action button and add a push publish action. I'll say that the action requires a lock on the content, define users and or roles that can see the option when editing the content, define the next workflow step, give the action a push icon, and click Save. Now under subactions, we'll need to choose a couple of subactions. Notice that there are two push publishing subactions, Push Now or Push Publish. The Push Publish option brings up the same light box we saw earlier that forces the user to choose the push, remove, push and remove options and configurations we saw earlier with the right-click Push Publish options. The Push Now option, however, allows the webmaster to pre-configure the type of push that will happen when the button is clicked. So after we add the action, we'll click on it to add the environment name, which is called production. Be careful as it is case sensitive, and note that multiple environments can be configured with comma separators. It's a good idea to leave the Force Push option set to false to avoid pushing objects that have already been sent, and click Save. It also makes sense to publish the content before we do the push, just in case the editor made changes. And we should unlock this user's lock on the content before sending it to the receiving server. So now let's test the workflow process as one of our content editors using the Login As feature. So we'll create a new document and move it to the Legal Approval Push Publishing step where we configured our Push Publish button. Now let's open the document again, and lock it for editing, which will reveal the new push publish option that we configured on the workflow scheme. This time, push publishing for the content editor is as simple as the click of a button, and off it goes to the receiving production server. We can still track the push using the same techniques as before in the push publishing queue, and not only do we see the document on the receiving server, but our workflow scheme was also updated as a dependency to reflect the new changes to the workflow. Notice that the user I use to send the content does not exist and does not have access to the production server. This is why the last editor is listed as system user. If the user does not exist, then we avoid the overhead of having to maintain users and role permissions on the receiving server. Simply permission the user to the objects on the sending server and give them the rights to push, and you are done. Each user group should be permissioned to only one authoring server, and that is also where object change history and push publishing histories should be examined or tracked. Now we are going to look at one more way that items can be bulk published without even configuring push publishing at all. Let's just say we had added a new content type called movies, which uses a brand new genre category taxonomy, and we had also uploaded a folder full of movie files and pages that we want to add to a bundled up file and upload that file directly to another server at our leisure. All we have to do is right-click on each of the objects and add them to a bundle whose name we choose by just typing it in. Remember that categories synchronize completely, so by clicking on the Add to Bundle button, I am moving all my local categories to my receiving server, not just one. Now that I have my categories in the bundle, I can add the new content type and the folder with the files and pages in it. Once we have all the desired objects in our bundle, we can go to the Push Publishing queue, click on the Bundles tab, and here we can push publish the bundle immediately using our configured push publishing connection. Or we can download for publish, which downloads the bundle locally. The bundle can then be uploaded to any dotCMS server that we have permissions to and that has the same dotCMS version, Java version, and database type. Or we can download this bundle as a remove all mechanism for the server we upload the bundle to using the download for unpublish option. For instance, complete websites can be downloaded as a bundle, carried around on a flash drive, and uploaded at any time to a compatible dotCMS server. Now that we have covered 3 different ways to push publish objects, now let's take a look at troubleshooting push publishing errors. Let's break the rules we have established and publish objects on both the sending and the receiving servers. If your permissions allow this to happen, content editors may eventually make mistakes like this, which produce evil doppelganger objects that look the same but are not, and cause push publishing errors. So I'll create a folder called doppelganger on the receiving server with a page in it called clone, and I will do the same exact thing on the sending server. The folder and page are now out of sync. They look the same but do not update each other because if we look at their history tabs, they do not have the same identifier and therefore cannot update each other, because they are essentially different objects. When objects on a receiving server seem duplicated or do not update properly, use the integrity checker on your receiving server under System, Configuration, and Publishing environments. Conflicts that are detected can be fixed by clicking on the View Conflicts button. Here, the evil duplicated content types, folders, workflow schemes, HTML pages, or file assets are exposed and can be fixed. If I choose the Fix at Local Node option, the offending local identifier will be replaced by the remote inode, and the 2 objects will be considered as the same object from that point forward. If I choose the Fix at the remote node, the inode of the object on the receiving server will be replaced by the local inode. Clicking on Fix Conflicts synchronizes the objects and resolves the conflicts. If the integrity checker does not reveal or fix the issue, then go to the Maintenance portlet under the System tab and examine the push publishing log that can be found under the Log Files tab. This log can help track down the root causes of push publishing errors.